This is probably the most controversial museum in Japan. The Yushukan Museum is located in the grounds of Yasukuni Shrine. They have both attracted controversy and have been internationally condemned, and in many ways they feed into each other. So let's start with the shrine. With the danger of massively oversimplifying a very complicated issue, the shrine basically has two base reasons for why it is controversial. Actually, I guess if I really wanted to complicate it, I could say both of them are about who is actually enshrined here. There is just shy of 2.5 million people enshrined here. Of them, however, 1,066 were war criminals, either A, B, or C, A being the worst. Of the A's, there are 11 here. There's also one person who is charged with A but convicted with B. There was also 2 people who were charged with A but died before sentencing could be complete. So, they're one part of the controversy, particularly the Class A's. The shrine enshrines anyone who died in service of the Japanese Empire, and that also causes a problem as there are Taiwanese, there are Koreans, there are ethnic minorities, and there are Okinawans who are enshrined here and their families do not like it. So many of those families want their relatives unenshrined here, but the policy generally in Shintoism is once a kami is enshrined, it cannot be removed. And also, they're a private religious organization. They get to make their own choices and their own rules. They are no longer controlled by the government. We want to take a minute and talk about what this video actually is. Just a brief explanation. So often when I see articles or videos about Yasukuni and Yūshūkan, they're surface level that touch on the latest controversy or a deep dive into one part of the whole story. This video is intended as a wide coverage of the shrine and museum's whole history. Not a focus on any one subject or event, so it's not as deep as a well, but it will do. Many groups and individuals will appear and reappear in the story. Feel free to rewind or pause and do your own research before coming back to the video. As I will be going in chronological order, it might feel like I mentioned some random things, but they will come back later. Or, if you're just here to fight in the comment section, go ahead, go down there, fight. I need the engagement, right? Punchy, punchy? Punchy, punchy? Punchy, punchy? No? No, no punchy, punchy?
Fight.
Fight! Yeah, she's got it. Founded by Emperor Meiji in 1869, the shrine enshrines individuals that died in service of the empire from 1853 to 1951. Yes, that might feel like an odd range of dates, but we will get into why. We're going to keep this basically chronological. The 1853 start date coincides with the start of the Bakumitsu and Commodore Perry coming to Japan. So basically, the last years of the Tokugawa shogunate. This means that individuals that helped lead to the Meiji Restoration and were killed are enshrined at Yasukuni Shrine. However, the oldest person I could find that was enshrined there was Sanai Hashimoto, who was killed in 1859 during the Ansai Purge. I know someone in the comment section is going to leave a comment about some older death that's enshrined there. And thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, you beautiful person. In June 1869, the Boshin War ended and the shrine was established by the Meiji Emperor with the name Tokyo Shokan Sha. He also had just recently moved the capital to Edo and renamed it Tokyo. At first, the Tokyo Shokan Sha was the apex shrine in a network of shrines around the country. And this practice, in many ways, split it into 2 systems. One, a state activity by the imperial government at what is now Yasukuni, and one that was local and location-based. From its founding, the shrine had a direct connection to the imperial family. You'll notice the 16-petal chrysanthemum mark on the gate and other locations around the shrine. And to this day, Yasukuni remains one of the 16 Choku Ashiya shrines. These are ones where imperial envoys are sent, in this case during the spring and autumn festival, for performing rituals. So, part of that ritual at Yasukuni is for the imperial envoy to bring silk fabric in 5 different colors. In 1879, 2 years after the Satsuma Rebellion, or Seinen War, Tokyo Shokushan was renamed Yasukuni, meaning pacifying the nation. Furthermore, in 1887, the authority to enshrine souls passed from Grand Minister of the State to the Army and Navy ministers. The shrine had also taken on a political bend, with it being the location of rallies and speeches in support of the empire, the military, and the empire's conquests. During the Russo-Japanese War, the Pokwan Victory Memorial was taken from what is now North Korea and shipped to Japan. It was placed first in an imperial museum and later moved to a backlot of Yasukuni, where it was pretty much forgotten. The Pokwan Victory Memorial was a monument built in Korea to commemorate Korea's victory over Japan in the Imjin War. Part of Imperial Japan's policy was that all residents of the empire were imperial subjects. Hence, they did not have something like colonial troops that some other nations had. As the empire grew, so did the range of ethnicities enshrined at Yasukuni. Ryukyns, Okinawans, started being enshrined in the Sino-Japanese War. Ainu started being enshrined in the Russo-Japanese War. And Koreans started being enshrined in World War I. Now, if you know your geography and you're paying attention, you'll notice that part of the empire is missing. Taiwan! The Treaty of Shimonoseki that ended the Sino-Japanese War granted Taiwan to Japan. However, the population of Taiwan was not happy with this. They took up arms and formed the short-lived Republic of Formosa. They were not able to stop the Japanese, but years of armed resistance and guerrilla warfare followed and made it difficult for Japan to control the island, meaning that they had to use more troops and more resources. The last major rebellion by Han Chinese against the Japanese was in 1915. Along with the Han Chinese population, the Taiwanese Aboriginals also resisted Japan's control of the island, and the last major uprising by Aboriginals took place in 1930. In summary, the emperor refused Taiwanese to be enshrined because they were a pain, and he might have wanted to avoid drawing attention to the colony where things were not going as planned. However, mounting casualties during World War II and the need to recruit and eventually conscript Taiwanese led to the Taiwan exclusion policy at Yasukuni Shrine to be rescinded. But let's go back to the 1930s. In 1932, at least 2 students at Sophia University, Japan's oldest Catholic university, and a Jesuit university, refused to engage in rituals at Yasukuni Shrine on the grounds that it was against their religion. I feel like I read a lot of history, and a lot of times I'm reading and suddenly it's like, the Jesuits! No, seriously, if there's ever a Wikipedia page about me and you go to the early life section, the Jesuits will be there. Anyways, Sophia University's military attaché was pulled, and the Archbishop of Tokyo and Sophia University went into damage control mode. Quickly, they ruled that students from Sophia University were at liberty to salute the war dead. Following this, in 1936, the Catholic Church issued, I don't remember my Latin, Pluries Instanterque, I should have paid attention in Latin class, ruled that visiting Yasukuni Shrine and many other Shinto shrines was an act of patriotic and not religious expression. So basically the Catholic Church says, look, if you're Catholic and Japanese, it's fine to go to this shrine and other shrines, patriotic, nationalistic shrines. 1937, the following year, the Marco Polo Bridge incident, or the Lugo Bridge incident, starts the Second Sino-Japanese War, or escalates it, or starts World War II. It did something, and that something was violence. Anyway, we're going to use the breakdown used at Yushukan Museum and call it the Second Sino-Japanese War. Then, in 1941, World War II started, and it contributed most of the shrines enshrined at Yasukuni. It had been practiced to announce the names of those enshrined in the Shrine's Gazette as part of honoring them as heroic spirits of the nation. That stopped in April of 1944 due to a desire to control the narrative by the government and most likely mounting casualties. Members of Tokotai units, special attack units, would often tell each other that they would meet again at Yasukuni Shrine, sometimes picking a specific place, like the third cherry tree left of the gate. On the 15th of August, 1945, Japan agrees to surrender, and that should be the end of the fighting, right? Well, I mean, maybe just a few units that got orders late, a few that defied orders, a few holdouts on some small islands. I mean, yes, but that was not the big thing. See, the Soviets kept fighting. Why? I mean, because they wanted more territory, obviously, and a stronger bargaining position to try to get an occupation zone in Hokkaido and Tokyo. Stalin messaged Truman at one point and said that if he did not get an occupation zone in Hokkaido, quote, Russian public opinion would be seriously offended. Truman's reply is best summarized in one word: no. Fighting in Manchuria lasted until August 20th. Fighting over the Sakhalin Island lasted until August 25th. The invasion of the Kuril Islands did not start until the 18th of August and lasted until the 2nd of September, the day that the surrender was officially signed. As a side note, being taken prisoner, military or civilian, by the Soviets was the worst. The US, the UK, and the Kuomintang repatriated the majority of Japanese POWs by 1946. The USSR started repatriation in 1946 with only 18,616 of the estimated between 560,000 and 760,000 prisoners. Some Japanese did not manage to get back to Japan until the 1990s, after the Soviet Union collapsed. Also, a few married locals and decided to stay in Russia or former Soviet nations. Ahiko Tatsuro, who passed in 2020, was the last known Japanese POW in the former USSR. By the time the 90s came, he was already married with kids and grandkids in Kazakhstan, so he elected to stay even after the fall of the Soviet Union when he could move back. In addition, some Japanese forces joined other groups and struggles, in China, in Vietnam, and Malaysia. Yasukuni Shrine enshrines a few Japanese who fought in the Indochina War against France. Japan's surrender in World War II also saw many Japanese officers and government officials commit suicide. They were later enshrined at Yasukuni Shrine. The occupation and reforming of Japan after World War II forced the separation of Yasukuni Shrine and the government, removing government control in 1945 with the Shinto Directive. In 1946, Yasukuni Shrine became a private religious organization, severely limiting any ability of the government to intervene in its affairs. This also meant that it was free to interpret doctrine as they saw fit. And part of that would come up later is the interpretation that once someone becomes enshrined, they cannot become unenshrined. During the occupation of Japan, the question also came up about what to do with the shrine. One common story is that there was a plan to destroy the shrine and put a dog racing track, and that two Catholic priests, Father Bruno Bitter and Father Patrick Bry, made an appeal to save the shrine on the grounds that honoring the war dead is the right and duty of citizens everywhere. It's a cool story, and they really did talk about the shrine with General HQ in 1945. However, it probably did not have as much impact as some scholars want to say it did. More modern historians will point to the U.S. Department of State's memorandum on the 15th of March 1944, titled Japan, Freedom to Worship. And it stated that nationalistic shrines should remain open, as it would do more to weaken the nationalistic cult than closing them, leading to recommendation number 4, and I'm going to quote this one and not summarize. 4. At the strictly nationalistic shrines, ceremonies or gatherings which involve demonstrations or large crowds at such shrines should be forbidden. The staffs of the national shrines other than physical caretakers, should be dismissed and not receive pay from the national treasury. These shrines should be permitted to remain open for individual worship, except in instances where such action appears to be contrary to public order and security. They then go on to recommend obtaining guidance from Protestant and Catholic missionaries to determine which shrines are nationalistic shrines. Additionally, the reverse course by GHQ in 1947 likely shifted attention and feeling away from removing Yasukuni Shrine, as the US shifted to building Japan into an ally that could help counter communism in Asia. In a remember this because it will be important later moment, Tsukuba Fujimaru became the head priest of Yasukuni in 1946. Tsukuba was born a member of the Tamashina branch of the imperial family. However, he was demoted to Marquis as part of the tightening of who was part of the extended imperial family by the minister of the imperial household. Unlike other men in the imperial family, Tsukuba took a role in academia, studying history, and avoided military service. In 1947, the War Dead Family Welfare Union was founded. This union provided assistance to widows, orphans, and aging parents of deceased veterans, as well as lobbying the government on behalf of those families. It would amass a large amount of political support for those it's helped. In 1953, it would go on to change its name to the Japan War Bereaved Families Association, and over the next few decades, its influence would continue to grow, and would grow closer to the Liberal Democratic Party. In the late 1940s and 50s, the shrine was busy enshrining the war dead of World War II. In 1956, the Ministry of Health and Welfare established a system to share information about deceased war veterans, and working together, they had enshrined almost everyone, with the exception of war criminals, by 1959. In 1959, 2 members of the imperial family were enshrined. One had died during the pacification of Taiwan from malaria, and one had died in northern China when his plane crashed. Unlike all of the other post-war enshrinements, the shrine sought permission from the family, in this case the imperial family, before enshrining these 2. A total of 27,863 Taiwanese and 21,181 Koreans are enshrined at Yasukuni Shrine, without the input of their family. In 1958, the last of the remaining war criminals were paroled, and the next year, Yasukuni started enshrining Class B and C war criminals who had been executed or died in prison. This process would continue until 1967. Some of those enshrined were done against the wishes of their family. In 1965, Chinrisha was built south of the main hall of Yasukuni Shrine. This smaller shrine is for the dead Japanese not enshrined at Yasukuni, so perhaps they rebelled against the empire, and the dead caused by the Japanese. In 1966, 14 names were forwarded to the shrine by the Health and Welfare Ministry. Of these 14, 11 had been executed for Class A war crimes. 1 had been charged with Class A but convicted of Class B and killed, and 2 had been charged with Class A but died before a verdict had been reached. In 1970, the Shrine's Lay Council passed a resolution to enshrine the Class A and accused Class A war criminals. However, they left the timing up to head priest Tsukuba, and Tsukuba ran interference by continuing to delay the enshrinement for the rest of his life. In the 1960s, discussion and ideas about how to bring Yasukuni Shrine back under government control were suggested, and this had the support of the Japan War Bereaved Family Association. In 1966, Yasukuni Shrine suggested coming under government control and being completely secularized. This angered members of the Daito Juko, some of whom assaulted the president of the Japan War Bereaved Family Association. In shame, the director of Daito Juko removed one of his fingers. In 1969, the Pakuan Victory Memorial was rediscovered, and demands for its return to Korea were made. Once again, the separation of religion and politics problem came up from the Japanese government side, and also the fact that the monument was taken from what is now North Korea, so can South Korea really be in a position to negotiate for its return? From 1969 to 1972, The Liberal Democratic Party, LDP, proposed bills each year to bring Yasukuni Shrine under government control. These were opposed by many religious groups, and the bills went nowhere. The Japan War Bereavement Family Association is considered by Yasukuni Shrine to be a de facto lay group. And for a while, one of the positions of the association was that the PM, the Prime Minister, should make official visits to the shrine. The group's political power peaked in the 1980s. On the 15th of August 1975, Prime Minister Miki makes a visit to the shrine as a private individual. This was the first post-war visit by a prime minister on the day of Japan's surrender. He arrived by private vehicle, he didn't bring any ministers, bodyguards, he paid for everything out of his own pocket, not from public funds. These types of post-war private visits attracted little attention. On the 21st of November, the same year, 1975, Emperor Showa visits the shrine. This would be Hirohito's last visit to the shrine and the last visit by any emperor. Also in 1975, a Buddhist monk named Nakata Junya, the head priest of Hosenji Temple, met Pope Paul VI. He asked the Pope to say a mass for the 1,618 men executed for war crimes. Pope Paul VI agreed, and it is alleged by the historian Nagayoshi Fuchinosuke to have said that the Tokyo war crimes that condemned the Class A war criminals were an embarrassment. The 20th of March, 1978, the head priest of Yasukuni, Tsukuba, dies. 1st of July, 1978, Matsudaira Nagayoshi is appointed the new head priest. Matsudaira was known for rejecting the verdict of the Tokyo trials. Fun side fact, Matsudaira's father-in-law is enshrined at Yasukuni as he'd been executed after being found guilty of Class B and C war crimes. Matsudaira's father had also been a bureaucrat in the imperial household office and had worked his way all the way up to Grand Steward before retiring. 17th of October, 1978, the 14 souls of convicted and accused Class A war criminals were enshrined in secret. It was not until April of 1979 that it became public knowledge that the Class A and accused Class A war criminals had been enshrined, and there was limited reaction. It almost seemed like the shrine had avoided blowback. But that would come. It just needed a match. On the 22nd of May, 1980, Pope John Paul II keeps his predecessor's word and says a mass for the 1,618 Class A, B, and C war criminals. Nakata Junma, the priest that had petitioned Pope John Paul VI, attended, and he brought a replica pagoda for the Pope to bless that had memorial tablets for all 1,618 war criminals inside. Now, why talk about Nakata and the popes? Well, mostly because it's interesting, but actually more importantly, because this comes up in defense of the Class A and other war criminals at times, is that even the Roman Catholics, the Pope, had no issue and thought it was wrong. This is a defense you hear sometimes. Remember how I mentioned a match? Actually, it wasn't that long ago. Prime Minister Yoshihiko Yashiro was the match to spark a blowback over the enshrining of the Class A war criminals. He visited the shrine on the 15th of August, 1985, August 15th being the anniversary of Japan's defeat. Unlike all of his predecessors, he visited in an official capacity, brought 17 members of his cabinet, made an offering of flowers, paid for with public money, and brought bodyguards. In many ways, this was a political bone, a political give to the Bereaved Families Association that had been pushing for the Prime Minister's visits to be changed from private to official. The head priest, Matsudaira, was less than impressed by Yashukan's visit, and it turned him off the idea of the shrine coming under government control. He was upset that Yasukun did not engage in the Shinto rites at the shrine. Yasukun did not ritually purify his hands. He did not clap and bow at the main hall. He did not offer tamagushi. He did not engage in purification ceremonies, and he brought bodyguards. Matsudaira refused to meet the Prime Minister as a snub. The visit got an immediate reaction both domestically and internationally. Domestically, opponents accused his visit of violating the Constitution's separation of religion and state. Internationally, the strongest reaction came from Beijing and Seoul. Yushukan had overseen a warming period of relationships between the People's Republic of China, we're going to call it China from now on, and Japan, and he had visited the PRC the year before. However, a growing trade imbalance in Japan's favor was already causing resentment towards Japan and just added fuel to the protests over his visit to the shrine. Yushukan agreed to no more visits, and he later admitted that part of the calculations that went into this choice was that further visits could hurt Hu Yongbang, the chairman of the CPC, the Communist Party of China, who was pro-rapprochement and pro-closer ties to Japan. On the 28th of April, 1988, the Imperial Household Agency Grand Steward Tomita Tomohiko recorded a note in his notebook about the Emperor's displeasure with Matsudaira and the enshrining of Class A war criminals, and how that was why he would no longer visit Yasukuni Shrine. 1896, Prime Minister Ryotaro Hashimoto visits Yasukuni Shrine. Being the former chairman of the Japan War Bereaved Family Association, this is not surprising. He stated that it was fulfilling a childhood promise. It was his only visit during his tenure as Prime Minister. September of 1997, the CPC mobilizes forces to stop student protests against Prime Minister Ryotaro during his visit to the People's Republic of China. In 2001, Koizumi is elected the Prime Minister of Japan. One of his promises is to visit Yasukuni Shrine every year, no matter the criticism. This was likely promised as a response to Ryotaro, who he was running against, and Ryotaro, he only visited that one time. Koizumi was one of those rare breeds of politicians that saw his election promises as unbreakable, and he did indeed visit every year. This was not well received in the People's Republic of China and South Korea. China in particular was in a tough spot. The 1980s had seen the nation's narrative on World War II change from China was the victor to China was a victim. They were also nervous about large rallies turning against them. With more freedom and increased economic power, there was an expanding, we'll call it a middle class in China. Many of the more citizens in China, therefore, had the time and energy for political beliefs and expression. This can be dangerous for an authoritarian government. The CPC started to shift that its legitimacy came from economic growth and patriotism. The problem is that over this subject, these two foundations would clash. For example, at the time, China was in the process of starting its high-speed rail network, and it was using low-interest loans called Official Development Assistance Loans, ODAs, from Japan to build infrastructure. From 2002 to 2004, the PRC scaled down how much they bought after protests, but they still did buy, and they shut down a website calling for the agreement to be canceled. Furthermore, due to deteriorating relationships with Japan, Japan stopped giving out ODA loans in 2005. From here on about Yasukuni, I'm not going to talk about the smaller protests, I'm not going to talk about the vandalism, and I'm not going to talk about the blown up toilets. As far as the lawsuits, I'm not going to talk about individual ones. I'm going to kind of put them together by groups and kind of talk about them at a very high level. And I'm only going to do this now. So, the ones against the Japanese government failed. So these lawsuits against the Japanese government to have the government remove the ancestors, relatives of the person suing, these failed. Why? Well, the government doesn't have control of the shrine. The shrine is protected by the separation of state and religion, and as an independent religious organization, they get to decide and interpret their own doctrine and who they enshrine. The suits against the shrine. I think the last one wrapped up in early 2025, but I could be wrong. These also went nowhere on the claims of damages, because they were judged to not be enough damage to waiver the 20-year statute of limitations, so they were removed or thrown out. In 2005, about 50 relatives of Taiwanese war dead enshrined at Yasukuni came to perform a ceremony to remove the souls of their relatives. Taiwanese politician Yushukan was among them. It was cancelled due to the disturbance it caused, along with sound trucks, protesters, and police requests. The trip was in part sponsored by Japan Catholic Council for Justice and Peace. And you thought I was done with the Catholics. In October of 2005, a small ceremony was held as the Pakwon Victory Memorial was removed from the grounds of Yasukuni Shrine. A joint plan by both Koreas called for the memorial to be first transferred to South Korea and then North Korea, and was a major symbol of inter-Korean cooperation. We also get some poll numbers from China, the PRC. So, Sino-Japanese relations continued to decline under Koizumi. Not surprised. So, poll data. Chinese declaring hatred towards Japan rose from 34% in 1997 to 53% in 2002 and 64% in 2005. Another 2005 survey found that 59% of Chinese citizens consider Yasukuni Shrine mainly as a symbol of militarism, 15% as a place of mourning the war dead, and 7% as a religious facility. I don't know if you can hear the rain, but it's coming down. My kid wanted to go to the park. Instead, she's watching a movie, so I'm recording this. 15th of August, 2006, Prime Minister Koizumi visits Yasukuni Shrine on the anniversary of Japan's surrender. He'd previously visited on other dates, but claimed that it was going to get protested and cause controversy no matter what, so he might as well go on the 15th of August. In 2006, some of the diary and entries by former Imperial Household Agency Grand Steward Tomita were made public. Referred as the Tomita Memo, it confirmed many people's suspicion that the enshrining of the Class A war criminals was why Hirohito, Emperor Showa, stopped visiting Yasukuni. The memo was called into question naturally, with only parts being released and the complete set of notes and diaries in the hands of the Tomita family. One of the largest criticisms was that if it is real, and if Hirohito was upset by the enshrining of the Class A war criminals, why did he still dispatch imperial representatives to the spring and autumn festivals? The contents of the Tomita memo were later backed up by Ryugo Obrei's Chamberlain's Diary, which was the diary of the Chamberlain at the time, that was published in 2007. On the 7th of June 2007, Lee Teng-hui, former president of the Republic of China, known as Taiwan, visited Yasukuni to pay respects to his older brother who died fighting for the Japanese army. Previously, he had voiced support for Koizumi's visits to Yasukuni. 11th of August 2009, Taiwanese politician Yushukan leads a protest at Yasukuni Shrine again. According to police reports, the protesters injured a security guard and police had to break up the scuffle. They also launched a lawsuit attempting to reclaim the soul tablets of their ancestors. Alright, let me talk about soul tablets for a second, because these have showed up a few times in protests and lawsuits. For some reason, soul tablets keep coming up, like there's literally a tablet of their ancestors that they can take out of the shrine. The shrine doesn't have soul tablets. It has a book, well, probably books, a registry that is, which is way less dramatic than over 2.4 million tablets. How big a book would you need for 2.4 million? It can't be one book, can it? How big a book would you need for 2.4 million names? Someone, in the comment section, beautiful person, tell me. The 14th of May, 2012, Reba Kaidier, the head of the World Yoga Congress, visits Yasukuni during her trip to Japan. She's in Japan for a conference, and she reportedly expressed that she wanted to establish a similar shrine to Yasukuni dedicated to the Uyghur heroes in the future. Yeah, that made the PRC feel really happy. 26th of December 2013, Abe Shinzo visits Yasukuni Shrine and Chinsurya. In an official statement, Abe said that he went to report before the souls of the war dead how my administration has worked for 1 year and to renew the pledge that Japan must never wage a war again. It is not my intention to hurt the feelings of the Chinese and Korean people. Well, the Chinese and Korean people certainly felt hurt, and they were very willing to express it. More muted reactions came from Russia, who called it regretful, and the United States that called it disappointing. On to celebrity news. In April of 2014, yes, even the Biebs makes a cameo in this drama. He is visiting Japan and he stops at Yasukuni Shrine. He takes a photo and he posts it on Instagram. This just happened to be a day after 150 lawmakers visited the shrine and a week after Prime Minister Abe sent an offering. Bad timing, but at least he didn't write anything stupid in the guest book. March of 2018, the Chinese actor and singer Zhang Zihan is in Japan. He takes a picture of himself next to cherry blossoms, following a recommended route, and you can see Yasukuni in the background of one of the photos. Doesn't really spark anything. The 1st of March 2018, Gohori becomes the new head priest at Yasukuni Shrine. He had previously worked at Ise Grand Shrine. The 20th of June, the same year, Gohori is at the first regular meeting of the Educational Research Committee with the second in command of the shrine and 8 other employees. Previously to this event, Gohori had been making appeals to Emperor Akito, the Hensai Emperor, to visit the shrine on its 150th anniversary before Akito abdicates. His appeals and attempts to negotiate with the Imperial Household Agency went nowhere. According to a transcript, at that meeting on the 20th, a staff member mentioned the Tomito memo, and that was what set Gohori off, and what was described as a solo performance. Or as today's kids would say, he crashed out. He just did it at a meeting and not on Twitter. Gohori stated, "The harder His Majesty travels to commemorate the spirits, the further away from Yasukuni Shrine he will become." This is criticizing the Emperor's visits to battlefields from World War II, but not Yasukuni Shrine. So this falls into the shrine's doctrine, belief, that the souls of the Japanese dead are not on the battlefield, but in Yasukuni Shrine. So in their viewpoint, he's just visiting a battlefield. He's not actually visiting their souls and spirits. He then follows this up with the singer, "To be honest, His Majesty is currently trying to destroy Yasukuni Shrine." And then he follows it up with some thoughts on the Crown Prince, now Emperor, Naruhito, and his wife, Masako, stating that Naruhito would never come and that his wife hates Shinto shrines. This gets leaked. Gohori ends up going to the Imperial Household Agency to apologize and is replaced on November 1st, making him the shortest-serving head priest at Yasukuni Shrine. 2019, Zhang Zihan is back in Japan and he attends a wedding at Nogi Shrine. Nogi Shrine is where General Nogi and his wife are enshrined. Nogi was a general in the Russo-Japanese War. He commanded the forces that captured Port Arthur and then later killed himself when Emperor Meiji passed away. Due to being located near Roppongi and Akasaka, many artists and people in the entertainment industry pray at Nogi Shrine. It's a popular venue for idols' coming-of-age ceremonies, or, in this case, for someone in the industry's wedding. Anyway, Zhang goes to a wedding at Nogi Shrine, and he takes a photo with Dewi Fuji, one of the wives of the first president of Indonesia. She had previously stated in interviews that she felt denial of Japanese war crimes fell under Japan's freedom of expression laws. She had also been critical of China over Tibet and maritime disputes. August 2021. A video of Zhang at Nogi Shrine starts to trend on Chinese social media. Quickly, the photo of him at Yasukuni is brought up and it becomes a much bigger deal than Nogi. Zhang faces domestic boycott and many brands sever relationships with him. I kind of included this story mostly for the reason of kind of giving a demonstration idea of how deep an issue this has become in the PRC. That this isn't something like, oh, we're just upset when politicians do it, but even when domestic actors are like, I took a picture. Oh, shrine's in the background. Burn him! Burn the witch! In April 1st of 2024, Osaka Yumi becomes the new head priest. Osaka is a former maritime self-defense force officer, an ambassador, and a graduate of the National Defense Academy. Let's move on to the museum. Yūshūkan. Yūshūkan Museum's controversies are best described as being, well, the museum engaging in historical revisionism. Opened in 1882, Yushukan is Japan's oldest war museum, not in continuous operation. When it opened, it showcased Meiji Restoration artifacts of the Imperial Japanese Army. and that's why it has, even to this day, a pretty impressive collection and complete collection of early struggles. Emperor Meiji's 192nd Order in 1910 ordered the preservation of military artifacts, and Yushukan was part of that effort. The First Sino-Japanese War, Russo-Japanese War, and World War I saw the museum expand to fit more documents and artifacts. In 1923, the building was destroyed by the Great Kanto earthquake, and it reopened in 1932. Okay, obvious reshoot is obvious. Yushukan had a massive collection of captured enemy material on display. So Sino-Japanese War, Russo-Japanese War, and then World War II kind of hypercharged this, particularly their early success in World War II. The museum remained popular in Japan until the end of World War II, and like the shrine, Yasukuni only suffered limited damage during World War II from the bombings. However, it did lose many paintings that were stored in a separate building from a fire. On the 25th of January 1946, a detachment of the United States 7th Cavalry arrived to clear the museum. The cannons outside the museum were cut into small pieces and sold for scrap. Everything else was taken to the garrison, and many of the swords and other objects were kept by soldiers as prizes. In October of 1946, some of the most valuable items, like ancient swords, helmets, and firearms, were returned to the Japanese government. The museum was closed, so they didn't have display spaces, so many of the items were returned to the person or family who had originally donated them. Some of the most historically valuable arms and armor were moved from Yushukan to the Tokyo National Museum. At this time, most of the collection from the Sino-Japanese War onwards was not returned, and even to this day, the museum does not have many weapons compared to other military museums around the world. After World War II, with the Shinto Directive and the separation of state and religion, the museum lost funding along with the shrine. To raise funds, the museum was rented out to Fukoku Mutual Life Insurance Company from 1947 until 1980. In the 1960s and 70s, some of the artifacts were returned and new donations were made. In addition, a section of the main shrine was used as a mini-museum starting in 1961. Matsudaira, Nagayoshi in particular, had a desire to reopen the museum. He had spent 10 years running the Fuki City History Museum before becoming head priest. In fact, one of Matsudaira's first actions as head priest was to obtain a Kaiten suicide torpedo from the U.S. Army Museum in Hawaii on permanent loan. The museum was reopened in 1985. Photography is only allowed in specific parts of the museum, such as the entrance hall that you can go into for free, and the large exhibit room. After the entrance hall, you go up an escalator, and the museum unfolds chronologically, starting with a small exhibit on the history of warfare in Japan before the 1850s, with a few swords, armor sets, firearms. It has a few examples of swords that were actually made at Yasukuni Shrine. I don't think I mentioned that before. So, lead up to World War II and parts of World War II, they actually made swords on the ground of the shrine in traditional style because they were worried as that the skill set, that the ability to make traditional swords was going to die off. So the shrine started its own sword making, brought in people to do that, and these swords were actually given, quite a few of the swords were given as gifts for top graduates from the different military schools. I would love an example of one of those swords. I don't know what they go for. I don't know if they're really expensive or if they're kind of more in the regular price range. Anyways, the museum itself really starts in earnest with the Boshin War and eventually leads to the Second Sino-Japanese War and World War II. The museum's overall narrative is of the sacrifice of the Japanese soldiers fighting and dying bravely for the emperor and country, and frames Japan's wars as necessary and defensive in nature. You get a lot more for the emperor in the civil wars and early on, and you get a lot more Pan-Asianism and anti-colonialism in the World War II sections. I will say, for me personally, anti-colonialism and the Pan-Asianism felt more randomly sprinkled in. For example, there was a small exhibit on Manchuria, Manchukuo, and part of the exhibit was on how Manchuria is different than China, and it frames it as liberating Manchuria after the Mukden incident. then the government of Puyi was never mentioned again. I was also a little surprised that there was not more about the collaboration forces that collaborated with Japan. Maybe I missed it, and not being able to take photos, it really hurts, B, because my memory is not that great. But I feel like I only saw one picture of Japanese and Indian National Army troops, and the Defenders of the Homeland, PETA, I feel like was mentioned. I do wonder if some of this is maybe a desire to frame the successes of World War II as all Japanese. A decent amount of wall space in the lead up to World War II is devoted to the negotiations between Nomura and Hull. Nomura from Japan, Hull from the US, that cultivated in the Hull Note, and as the museum framed it, the Hull Note and the US's actions forced Japan to go to war. But the revisionism that's the most controversial is what's not said. The massacres, the targeting of civilians, the human experiments, the cruelty that goes beyond war and normal war. All of it unmentioned, swept under the bed, trying to forget it like a one-night stand that went poorly. Honestly, I found the most impactful part of museums the Spirits of Yasukuni Shrine section. It's just walls of photos. And some of the photos, they have explanations about the person's life and how they died. It's showing the human cost of just one side of a war. The soldiers, the pilots, the sailors, the nurse, the civilian workers, the students, the POWs in Soviet camps. And that's just one nation. Exact casualty numbers in World War II will never be known. But Japan most likely had the 6th most deaths, coming in behind the Dutch East Indies, Poland, Germany, China, and the Soviet Union. The cost of World War II in human life is mentally staggering, with the low estimate being approximately 70 million deaths. Before we end this, let's go over a final tally of who could be enshrined at Yasukuni. So, military personnel and civilians serving for the military who were killed in action or died as a result of wounds or illness sustained while duty outside the home islands and within the home islands after September 1931. Missing or presumed to have died as a result of wounds or illness sustained while on duty, died as a result of war crime tribunals which have been ratified by the San Francisco Peace Treaty. Civilians who participated in combat under the military and died from resulting wounds or illnesses, including residents of Okinawa. Civilians who are died or presumed to have died in Soviet labor camps during and after the war. Civilians who were officially mobilized or volunteered. So these would be factory workers, mobilized students, Red Cross nurses, anti-A raid volunteers who were killed on duty. Crews who were killed aboard merchant navy vessels. Crew who were killed due to the sinking of an exchange ship. Okinawan children evacuated who were killed. Officials of governing bodies of Kyofuto Prefecture, Katwang leased territories, Governor General of Korea, and Governor General of Taiwan. Do you want to come join me? My research assistant is coming. Alright, that brings us to the end of our tour. I know a bunch of you want to, so why don't you go into the comment section, square off with each other if you haven't already. Like, share, comment, subscribe. Lily, you remember how to fight? Drop the hockey stick. Drop the gloves. Grab the shirt. Boom, 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 punchy, punchy. Punchy, punchy, punchy. Punchy, punchy, punchy. Punchy, 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 punchy. Anyways, I'm Debonair Dylan. This is my research assistant, Lovely Lil. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. History is everywhere, and it's both glorious and tragic. I'll see you in the next video. They both attracted controversy and international condemnation. So, let's start with the shrine.
No.